Hey, what's going on, everybody? Atomic Moon here, and I'm bringing you the next edition of my deep dive into Line 6 Helix Native. For those of you new to the channel, and for those of you that have seen my other videos, you know I'm going to tell you all to like, subscribe, share, and get this information out with anybody that you think could use it, could benefit from these services that I'm providing. I appreciate everybody for checking out my videos, for subscribing, and for commenting. I really appreciate comments. I try to get back to any sort of comments and questions and concerns that anybody has. And with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into this. Today I'm going to be covering the modulation modules inside Line 6 Helix Native. And we're going to go through each one of them and talk about some of the ins and some of the outs and some sound examples. And yeah, let's get rocking and rolling. Okay, guys, so I'm inside of Cubase 5 right here. What I want to mention before I get started on anything, since we're going over the Modulation tab here in Line 6 Helix Native, I want to explain the difference real quick between mono effects and stereo effects. Okay, so the things we've been going on before, or the things I've gone over before, as far as distortion and dynamics. These are primarily going to be mono effects. They're effects that you can run in stereo, but are primarily not going to affect your stereo image a whole lot. And you know, when you're plugging in a guitar is going to be a mono input signal. You know, you're just running one cable into an input, and it's basically going to be a mono signal until you change it into a stereo signal. Okay, and so right here I have two different instances, two different channels that I'm going to be running my guitar through. So my first channel is going to be a mono channel that I have my guitar recorded on, and this is going to be going into, one second. I'm going to be doing some processing on here, but this is all going to be still in mono, and then I'm taking the output from this channel and running it into an FX channel that is going to be a stereo channel. Okay. So basically, the modulation, which is going to be choruses, flangers, phasers, things like that, are going to be affecting your stereo signal. Now you can run these effects in mono as well as stereo. Let me pull this up. If I go down to this modulation tab, you have an option for mono, stereo, and legacy. We'll go over that, but you do have the option for mono and stereo. And what you would want to do if you were running it just kind of depends on your signal flow. If you're running a effect into an amp, your amp is going to be a mono signal. So any sort of chorus effects or anything like that you're going to run before your amp, you're going to want to have that in mono. And if you need to pay attention to what kind of channel that you have. For example, my guitar channel that I have my guitar input recorded on is a mono channel. So if I ran a stereo effect on this mono channel, you know, I would still get signal, but it wouldn't be in stereo. It would still be in mono because this is a mono channel. So therefore, I have to run this mono channel into a stereo channel to be able to get a full stereo effect. So the main thing I want you guys to keep in mind is that you can run these effects in mono and stereo, but just kind of keep in mind based on your signal flow, you know, kind of what your best option is going to be. And I'm going to run this in stereo after my guitar amp processing. So if I pull this up real quick, basically I have this little guitar part, you know, just kind of some chords that I'm running into a red squeeze compressor, into a tweed blues with a 410 cabinet. So this is all going to be mono. It's a mono input and then a mono output. And then I'm going to run all of these modulation effects after my guitar has already been processed by the compressor and by the amp simulator. And that's just to kind of give you a better idea of how this works on a stereo spectrum. But once again, the point I'm trying to hammer here is that you can run all of these in mono before you, you know, for example, if I wanted to run one of these before it hits my amp right here, like if I wanted it to act like a stomp box or whatever, then I would have that option. But I'm going to go ahead and run all of these to kind of save time. I'm going to go ahead and run them all in stereo, and then you'll have a better idea of how these effects affect your stereo signal. But you can run all of these in mono if you wish to do that. So, and then also having said that, you know, these stereo type effects are going to be good to use not just for guitar, but for any other processing that you would want to do in a stereo signal. You know, you can run vocals through this, you can run synthesizers through this, you can run drums through this. You know, this isn't necessarily just for guitar, even though this is designed for guitar, for a guitar-based plugin. You can run whatever kind of signal that you want through it and get creative with it. So, just two little disclaimers that I wanted to throw out there before we really start getting involved in this. And having said all that, let's go ahead and get started. So I have this in my, once again, my guitar input being processed right here, and then going into an FX channel with a different instance of Helix Native ran. And so this is a stereo FX channel. Right here on this tab, I have a mono pulled up. So if I ran this, maybe not use a tremolo, let's use a different, let's use like a 70s chorus. Okay, so a chorus is going to be primarily a stereo effect. So it's taking your mono signal and splitting it and having it in stereo to where it's going to be wider than just in mono. But right now I have this effect pulled up in mono. So even though it's on a stereo channel, it's going to play back in mono. So we'll let me go ahead and play this. And you can notice right here on the output on span, as well as the output here on the main channel, you can tell when something's in stereo versus mono, because you'll have a stereo output. You know, you'll have your two lines right here, and they'll go up and down at exactly the same level. That's kind of how you can tell that something's in mono. Whereas when I flip this over to stereo, you'll notice that there's a little bit of fluctuation between the left and right channels. So that's kind of a visual way that you can kind of tell that that something's playing back in mono. So I mean, once again, it's just being cognizant of if you're running in stereo versus if you're running in mono. So right now I have this pulled up in stereo, the same chorus pedal. So I'll play it back again. The spread is set to 0, so let me turn the spread up. There you go. See, now you can really start. You can hear the stereo spread, assuming that you're listening to this video on stereo speakers. If you're listening to it on your phone, if your phone is in mono, if your phone only has a mono output, then you might not be able to hear it. But if you're listening on headphones or some sort of stereo speakers, then you can hear it. But if you can't hear it, you can also tell by the output signal right here, and noticing that the left and right signal is fluctuating. You can notice that it's playing back in stereo. So it's mono right there. So yeah. It just, I mean, I feel like I'm kind of spending too much time on this, but just to give you an idea, if I pull this up right here on my mono channel, even if I pull it up in stereo, what did I have, 70 scores? Okay. It's still going to play back in mono, so. See, I have the stereo spread all the way up, or pretty close to all the way up, but it's still playing back in mono. Because it's a mono channel. So once again, just be cognizant of if you're running a mono channel, you know what your signal flow is, yada yada yada. If you want things in stereo, sometimes you don't always want things in stereo. Sometimes you want them in mono. Sometimes you don't want them in mono. You want them in stereo. So just kind of be aware of that. You know, if you're playing live and you're just running one mono output, then having stereo effects is going to be essentially pointless, because you're just running it out, your output in mono. Or if you are running stereo effects, then you might be a little bit more cognizant of running stereo effects and making sure that you're running two different outputs that you're running to the front house engineer. Okay, got all that out of the way. Make sure that I'm lined up correctly. I believe that I am. Okay, so having said all that, let's start diving into this. So the first effect that they have on here is going to be the optical trem. The optical trem is going to be based on the Fender optical tremolo circuit, which I'm assuming is going to be basically a circuit that's within a Fender, one of the Fender amps that's already on here. But kind of, you know, they took the tremolo part out of it and then kind of gave it its own plug-in here. So a tremolo is going to be more so a volume type of effect and not so much of a stereo effect, although it is kind of thrown in here with the modulation. But what a tremolo is basically going to fluctuate your volume and kind of give you like a helicopter type sound. But there also is a spread knob here, so we have speed, intensity, spread, and level for our four what you might call things that we can actually change. So your speed is going to be how much or how fast the fluctuation occurs. The intensity is basically how drastic the change is. So if you have the intensity set a little bit lower, then it's not going to fluctuate the volume as much as it would if you have the intensity set up high. If you have the intensity set up high, then it's going to fluctuate the volume more so. Spread is going to be basically how much stereo spread it's going to give here in the stereo signal, and then level is going to be how you can adjust your output level. So let me pull this back up just with the stock settings and play this back. Okay, so as I play that back, you notice there's a fluctuation between the left and right speakers. So this is kind of like an auto pan, which is, you know, we'll get to this here in a couple of with this tremolo auto pan. But so if I put the spread all the way down, it'll fluctuate the volume, as in. Well, let me just play this back. So as you can tell, it's dipping the volume down and then bringing it back up and doing it. If I adjust the speed right here, it'll slow down how fast the effect takes place. If I speed it up. And then the intensity, if I back it down, it'll be more subtle. If I put it all the way up, it'll probably take it from all the way down to all the way up to all the way down, blah, blah, blah. So let me play around with that. So this is traditionally how a tremolo works, in my opinion, and how it would work in a guitar sense if you're running it in a mono signal. But if I put this spread up, it basically starts acting as an auto pan, to where it's not so much changing the volume. I mean, it is changing the volume, but it's also fluctuating the left and right speakers, to where it's instead of fluctuating up and down on a y-axis, it's basically fluctuating via an x-axis on your stereo spread. So let me pull back up the stock settings. And you'll notice the spread right here. If I have it all the way down, it's going to be in mono. If I put it all the way up, it'll be in stereo. And then you can really kind of hear the left-right fluctuation. So So yeah, something to think about as you're running your tremolo. I really like tremolo. It's a really kind of nice effect to kind of give some variation, especially if you're holding out chords that that don't have a whole lot going on. It kind of adds a nice little texture to it. So 60 bias tremolo is going to be our next effect, and it's going to be based on the Vox AC15 tremolo. So once again, like the last effect, is going to be the tremolo that's inside of one of the amps that they have on here. This is also based on the tremolo inside of a Vox AC15. Which is kind of cool. So if you had like a Marshall or like one of the other amp emulations on here, but you wanted the tremolo from a Vox AC15, you can kind of mix and mash those effects in together. So it's pretty much the same controls, except we have a little switch right here for tremolo versus vibrato. So my assumption is that the tremolo is going to be a little bit more harsh than the vibrato. The vibrato might be a little bit more subtle, but we'll switch it back and forth to give you guys an idea of how it sounds. So I have the spread all the way down right now, so it's going to be in mono. It's not going to be getting a stereo spread. Let me turn the level up just a little bit. So I'll switch back between the tremolo and vibrato, and you can kind of hear the differences between the two. So it seems like the vibrato is more subtle in the overall volume. It's not dipping the volume as much, but it's also making the effect, the speed of the effect, a little bit faster. So that's pretty interesting. If I let me play around with the speed while I change these. And now I'll take the spread up, so this will actually introduce some stereo spread into the signal. Cool. I think that sounds pretty nice. Tremolo auto pan based on the Boss PN2. You can tell we have a few more options as far as things that we can adjust on this particular modulation pedal. This is going to be more of a stomp box, not it's based on a stomp box effect compared to the other two that we looked at that are actually based on modulations within a particular amp circuit. So you see we have speed, intensity, and by the way, these, you notice this little clock right here. If you click this on, it'll sync it up to your project tempo. And so if I sync that up, it actually gives me some actual time signatures here. So that'll be nice if you're trying to get it completely synced up with your project tempo. And if you click it off, then it's just based on a hertz cycle. So also another thing to keep in mind, especially with these time-based effects, especially when we start getting into delays and stuff like that, you're probably going to want a lot of those to be actually synced up to your project tempo. So that's how you do that right there, is you just click that little clock right there, and then you'll be synced up to your project tempo. I recorded this guitar part not with any sort of project tempo in mind, so it would be pointless for me to try to sync that up, but a little tidbit there to keep in mind. So going back over here, we got speed, intensity, wave shape. So wave shape is going to be interesting is it's basically going to change the way that the signal is modulated. So a sine wave is going to be a very smooth, kind of roller coaster, up and down type of a thing. A triangle is going to be, instead of curving off at the top and curving off at the bottom, it's just going to go straight up and then just go straight down and then straight up and straight down without kind of smoothing off. Saw down and saw up. So saw up is basically going to be, the effect is going to go straight up, and then as soon as it reaches its maximum height or whatever, it's going to cut off and start over at 0, and then go up, start over, up, start over. Saw down is going to start with the effect already at the top, and then it's going to ramp down. I mean, that's basically another way to phrase it. Instead of saw down is ramp down. So it'll start up at the top, go all the way down, and then start back over at the top, and then it'll go all the way down. Square. The best way to think about square is it's going to be like an on-off switch. So it's going to be either at the top or it's going to be at the bottom. It's not going to actually fluctuate like in the middle. It's going to be either on, off, on, off. Inverse sine is basically going to be your sine wave, but just kind of reversed. And then random is just going to be just whatever kind of modulation the particular pedal can come up with. So. And then duty cycle is going to be how fast the cycle repeats. And then spread is going to be your stereo spread. So let's go back to the stock settings on this and see what it sounds like. Let me turn this up a little bit. So, right now the wave shape is set to square, so you can notice the difference between this and this square wave shape and the other tremolos that we've been looking at. I mean, it's like on, off. It's like clearly over here and then clearly over here. It's like on, off, without any sort of fluctuation in between. So if I switch it over to a sine, then you'll notice it's like a little bit smoother. It's not like as on, off as the square wave. So you know, you can kind of like hear it kind of snaking back and forth, whereas the square wave is just gonna be like bop, 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 bop. So going to the triangle is gonna be it's going to be a little bit less subtle. It's going to be a little bit, I don't know if harsher is the right word, but a little bit more drastic than the sine wave. The sine wave kind of smooths out as it reaches its maximum and the least value that it gets to, whereas a triangle goes straight there and then straight back. So we can listen to this. So yeah, it's subtle, but that's kind of something to play around with if you're deciding what to do. The saw up. Let me play this back. This isn't going to be as drastic in the stereo signal as it would be if I put it in mono. So let me put the spread all the way down, and we can get kind of a better idea of it in mono. So here we go. So you can kind of hear it's ramping up, and then as soon as it gets to its maximum value, it drops back down to 0, and then it ramps back up, drops back down. Kind of almost gives it like a reverse type of effect, like a volume swell type of a thing. And then ramp down is basically going to be the opposite of that. So So the saw down, it almost gives it like a percussive element to it because it's going from 0 to 100 just instantaneously, and that kind of gives it that like almost plucky type sound. So the saw up kind of is like a reverse swell type thing, whereas a saw down is more kind of a plucky type of effect. So it's pretty neat, something to think about. Inverse sine, as I was talking about, is basically just a sine inverted. So. Yeah, you can notice if I put the intensity up like all the way, it really kind of starts cutting out the signal. It's basically, I mean, it's just giving you the opposite of what the sine is giving you. So the sine is giving you like a volume fluctuation. So like imagine like the negative side of that. Like I don't, it's kind of hard, it's difficult for me to kind of put into words right now, but it's something to play around with. It kind of gives you maybe some percussive elements that might be cool as kind of like a background effect or something like that. So something to think about. It might be cool to have something like that and actually sync it up to your project tempo to where it's kind of giving some percussive type effects. And then random is just random. Something like that might be cool if you're, I don't know, making like soundscapes or like noise effects and stuff like that, like stuff that doesn't really necessarily have a musical value, but like if you were doing, I don't know, like sound design for like just kind of background noise for like film or something like that, then that might come a little bit more into play. But as far as like musical applications, maybe not so much. But and then your duty cycle. Let me go to the saw up and kind of mess around with this duty cycle. Yeah, I'm not to be honest, I'm not exactly sure what that's doing. I think it probably plays into some of these other, into these other waveforms, but it'd be something to look up a little bit later and kind of get a better idea of how it's working. This is kind of just a general overview of all the effects, guys. Okay, so let's go to the next one, harmonic tremolo. So this is basically going to be a tremolo with extra harmonic content that's kind of being added in. So let me just play it to kind of give you an idea what it sounds like. So it almost sounds like the bass frequency and the treble frequency is acting more like a filter. So if I turn the treble frequency up, it's actually kind of cutting down on some of the frequencies, whereas if I turn the bass frequency down, it's kind of letting some more low end kind of pass through. So. So yeah, basically a tremolo with like some added filter and features, things like that. And that one's based on the that's actually a Line 6 original. So yeah. Moving on to the Bleak Chop Trim. This is based on the Lightfoot Labs Goatkeeper. So this is going to be kind of like a step sequencer introduced into a tremolo. So this will be kind of like for more experimental type tones and something to like kind of mess around with, to kind of give it's like a tremolo with more like kind of rhythmic type pattern type stuff. I'm not gonna get too far into this, but we'll mess around with it for a little bit. I'll leave it on square. So as you can tell, it's modulating how much the effect is taking place via every step. Okay, so for the first step, for however long the duration is, it's set at 2 right now. So that's how much of the actual volume fluctuation is taking place, and then it steps up to 4 on step 2. So basically, the cycle doubles whenever it gets to step 2, and then step 3, the modulation doubles even again. So basically, during the duration of how long the note is being held out, or however long the part is being played, with the way that these things are set right now, the effect kind of speeds up as it cycles from step to step to step. So playing that back again, you can just notice how the effect kind of speeds up and starts getting more drastic as the duration of how long it's being played goes through. And this would be an effect that would be better suited for actually syncing it up to your project tempo and things like that. So yeah, something to keep in mind. And then you have your wave shape right here. Pretty much your standard wave shapes that you see in the other effects: saw up, saw down, triangle, sine, square. Doesn't have the random, because basically, I mean, this is basically your random wave, but you can actually kind of program the random wave to do what you kind of want it to do. So moving on, we're getting away from tremolos and getting into phasers. This is the Script Mod Phase based on the MXR Phase 90. This is a very classic pedal, just kind of a one knob type thing, but the actual hardware pedal only has one knob. But here in Helix Native, we have a couple more options: your rate, spread, mix level. So let me play this back. So yeah, it's a very classic pedal. A lot of guitar players using this pedal throughout the year, so it's got kind of has its own like signature sound. Let me turn the spread up and the mix up, and kind of mess around with that. So with these types of modulation effects, turning the mix all the way up kind of almost makes it a little bit more dry. Like if you have the mix back down to like 50% and you have that dry signal in with the wet signal, it kind of gives the wet signal something to modulate around. So like the contrast that you're hearing between the wet and the dry signal kind of makes it sound more wet with these types of like phase and chorus like modulation type signals. So like if you have it completely wet, to where you're only hearing the wet signal. It's like the wet signal doesn't have anything contrasting it, and therefore it's almost more dry than it would be if you just like set it to 50%. So that's kind of something to keep in mind as you're kind of dialing in these types of modulation effects. But yeah, a classic pedal. Would highly recommend throwing that in to your guitar chain. Pebble Phaser is based on the Electro-Harmonix Small Stone. And this is pretty standard phaser type stuff with an extra added color on-off switch right here. So let's give this a listen. So with the color off, it's just like giving you the standard phaser sound, but the color on seems like it's giving a little bit of a wah effect. So like a filter, like an added like high or a low pass filter kind of added in there to kind of make the effect stand out a little bit more. So that's kind of nice. Moving on, Ubiquitous Vibe, based on the Shin-ei Uni-Vibe. As you can tell, there's a couple of features on this particular pedal that are unique to it. The lamp bias. Let's play this back. So you'll notice there's like the last pedal, there's kind of this low pass filter that's kind of modulating along with it and giving you the whoa, whoa, whoa type sound. And adjusting the lamp bias kind of makes that a little bit more subtle or a little bit more drastic based on how you set it. So that's kind of a nice little unique thing to work into here. So let me play it back and really kind of notice the low pass filter and how drastic it is whenever I change the lamp bias right here. Cool. That sounds pretty cool. The Deluxe Phaser, this is a Line 6 original. It's basically just a phaser, and this gives you a little bit more options for things that you can adjust on here. Let's play it through, see what it sounds like. So rate's set pretty low right here for the stock setting. Let me turn it up just to kind of make it a little bit more drastic and to where you can really hear the differences. Typically when I use a phaser, or when I use a phaser chorus and stuff like that, I typically have my rates set pretty low to give it a more subtle type of a vibe. But setting it higher definitely gives it its own characteristics. So, there would be instances when you would want to have it set higher. So that's something to keep in mind. But I'm gonna put the rate about midway and kind of mess around with some of these knobs here. So right here we have a depth, offset, feedback, and wave shape, mix, stages. So your depth and your offset, these are kind of controls that you kind of see more in a chorus. So your depth is going to be like how kind of how wide the signal is going to be in a way, and then your offset is going to be how much the stereo signal is offset. So if you have the offset set really high, it's going to offset the left and the right signal to kind of make it make the stereo signal like, you know, more drastic to where you can really hear the effect. Whereas if you have it set down, then the stereo signal isn't as offset, and it's going to be a little bit more of a subtle effect. So let me mess around with these knobs and play it back for you. So the offset knob is kind of working in the opposite way that I would assume. So the offset, if you have it down, is actually offsetting the signal from the left and right to kind of make it, you know, more of a spread. Whereas if you turn it up, then the offset isn't as drastic. So you can see right there, that's kind of more subtle. Mess around with the depth. Stages, this is kind of interesting. So stages, I'm pretty sure, is voices. So this is a deluxe phaser, but this really is kind of giving you options as far as a chorus. Like, these are a lot of options that you would see with a chorus, especially stages, which is voices. So this is basically like how many. If I have it to 2, that's basically like 2 voices. So it's like 2 signal, or like 1 signal for each side. Whereas if I have it up to 4, it's gonna split, or 3 or 4 or whatever. It's gonna split your guitar signal or whatever signal you're running into it into different types of voices to make it sound like. I mean, think about voices like in a choir. So this would be like 2 people singing versus 3 people singing versus 4 people singing, 5 people singing, blah 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 blah, 12 people singing. You know, the type of effect you would get with 12 people singing versus like 2 people singing. So basically, it's going to give you more of a overt type of a signal with your phaser. And whenever I'm turning up the stages, you can kind of hear my my signal starts clipping, because like it's really kind of putting a lot of strain on the CPU to split it up into that many voices. So I mean, if you're familiar with synthesizers, then you kind of get into voices a lot more, like if you're making super saws and things like that. So it's kind of the same idea with the phaser here. Gray Flanger based on the MXR 117 Flanger. So Flanger is basically a phaser, but just kind of different. But it kind of gives you that same type of a vibe, though. Flanger is going to be more like airplane type sounds. So yeah, it's definitely got like its own characteristic to it. If you think about like Eddie Van Halen, you know, that's kind of what I think of whenever I think about a flanger. So let me play this back. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty much like a phaser, but it just kind of has its own unique kind of characteristic. You know, you have your width, which is going to be your stereo width. So your manual right here would be how you would manually adjust the flanger vibe. So this would be something that you would you know, you can turn it up. It's really more designed to be used in conjunction with like an expression pedal, or if you had it assigned to a macro control inside your DAW or something like that. Yeah. Moving on. Let's go to harmonic flanger. So yeah, it's going to be a flanger with some more harmonic content added in here. So let me play this back. So yeah, it's basically adding in harmonic content to kind of give you a little bit more of a texture with your sound. And so also bear in mind that if you stop playing, then that sound is also going to like continue to happen. So yeah, this is one of those pedals that'd be fun to just kind of mess around with to really get some kind of experimental type stuff. It'd be interesting to add this with like a distortion pedal or something like that, and really kind of put the spread knob used in conjunction with an expression pedal or something like that. And the spread knob here is like more of a spread to how much of a spread the harmonic content, like how high up it's going and how low it's going, rather than with the other pedals, which is like how much of a stereo spread you're getting. And then the odd and the even, it seems like the even is more like low frequencies and the odd is kind of more higher frequencies. So yeah, this is just kind of something to play around with to kind of get some really interesting tones out of. So yeah, knock yourself out with that one. And that's based on the ADA flanger. I don't know if I mentioned that. So going to the next one, it's going to be the Courtesan flange based on the Electro-Harmonix Deluxe EM. So yeah, let's listen to how this sounds. So you can tell it's giving that kind of whooshy type wah LFO that I mentioned on some of the previous knot boxes. Messing around with the color kind of gives you either more lower harmonics, or if you put it up, it's going to be more higher harmonics. Spread kind of controls how drastic the whooshy type sound is. Let me mess around with this range knob. So yeah, the range kind of decides how much upper harmonic content is going to be on there. So if I go to the Freeze LFO, this is something that I would assume would be used in conjunction with an expression board or like a stomp box control that you can just press the switch on to kind of turn this on, and then I'm assuming it just kind of rings out. Let me see what happens. Okay, so this, instead of fluctuating the actual LFO and it just going all over the place, you can actually turn this on and then adjust your parameters right here to kind of have it, instead of like fluctuating, going up and down, it'll stay at exactly whatever settings you have on here. So that's kind of interesting. That would be something that would be good to have an expression pedal for. So you could, use like your wah or whatever to go up and down to kind of adjust the spread or adjust the colors or adjust whatever parameters that you have. I mean, you could even adjust. You could have it programmed to where the spread, whenever you press the pedal down, will go up, and then the color will go down at the same time. And then whenever you press it back up, then it'll do the opposite. So that would be kind of cool to mess around with an expression pedal. Dynamics Flanger, based on the this is actually a Line 6 original. So let me play this back. So yeah, this is a flanger that gives you a lot of different controls. I'm sure if I really dove in and saw like everything that's going on with this, it'd make a little bit more sense. But basically, you have three different options. You have your LFO, your envelope, and your manual. Your LFO is going to give you like a constant, like up and down, up and down. Your envelope is basically going to be, it's going to depend on how you have the settings set, but it's going to open and then kind of, as you're playing, it'll open up and then just kind of stay with whatever the controls are. And then your manual would be something that you would have in conjunction with your expression pedal or whatever. It's kind of a lot to dive into with the 40 or so other pedals that I'm trying to cover on here, so I'm just going to kind of move on. Chorus, just stock line 6 chorus. Yeah, so we're getting into some more chorus type effects, which chorus is an effect that I use pretty heavily in my productions and in my guitar, whatever. Chorus is basically going to, like the name suggests, and like I went over on one of the other stomp boxes, is it's going to basically split your signal up into different voices and kind of make it sound like more than one guitar, more than one whatever it is that you're putting into is playing. And so you'll notice similar controls to what we've seen with the tremolo and the flanger and the phaser, yada yada yada. The main difference between these three things, the phaser, flanger, and the chorus, is just the tonality that you're going to get based on the different ways that it modulates the actual signal. Chorus, if you turn it all the way up, it really gives you kind of like a circusy type, like detuned vibe. So that's basically what the chorus does, is it splits up the signal into different voices and actually detunes it and then fluctuates how it's tuned. So if you turn the speed up, it really kind of gives it, its own kind of unique vibe. Yeah, it sounds detuned because that's what it's doing. It's detuning it. So then you see your pretty standard stuff: depth, how much it's detuning it, pre-delay. And pre-delay is kind of interesting. It's basically basically like a pre-delay that you would find on a reverb, just kind of delaying in milliseconds how long it takes for the effect to take place. And then your different wave shapes, same wave shapes we're seeing on the other effects. This one actually has a tone knob, so if we can mess around with that. So yeah, it's basically adding in more high-end information, low information, stuff like that. Kind of a filter type effect to kind of dial in the tone. Okay, moving on. We have the 70s chorus. This is going to be based on the Boss CE1. So we'll give this a listen. So this is kind of interesting because it has a chorus rate as well as a vibrato rate and vibrato depth. So it's actually kind of a chorus of vibrato. With the stock settings, spread is all the way to 0, so that is we're hearing that back in mono. It has like a stereo switch right here, so let me kick the spread up and then toggle this true and classic to see what that's doing to the stereo signal. So it seems like the classic maybe doesn't have as much of the mono signal in it, and then the true kind of has the mono signal still in there while blending in the stereo effect. So the classic is a little bit more wider than the true. Let me switch over to vibrato. So it looks like you have the chorus rate. So it doesn't have a depth. It's just kind of rate just like a one knob type thing. And then if you switch over to vibrato, it actually kicks in these vibrato rate and vibrato depth controls. And then once again, you can set both of these to sync up with your project tempo. Yeah, that's pretty much it for that one. Plastic chorus based on the modded Arion SCHZ chorus. I think I actually had this at one point. It was a nice pedal. So as you can tell, it's got the chorus and vibrato switch right here. Once again, vibrato is going to deal mainly with volume fluctuation, whereas chorus is going to be pitch fluctuation. This one actually has the different controls for the rate and the depth, as well as tone. So if you have it set lower, it's going to kind of basically have a low pass filter, so it's going to start cutting high frequencies if you have it set down low. And then it'll start cutting low frequencies if you have it set up high. And then mix level, your stereo spread right here. Headroom, I haven't really mentioned headroom. Headroom is just basically, it's just basically another gain type knob. So you have your level set right here, and then you also can adjust your level even more through this headroom knob. Moving on, Trinity chorus, based on the Diatronix tri-stereo chorus. Yeah, so this looks like this is kind of splitting the signal up in left, right, and center, and then you can kind of really kind of dial in what you want as far as or gives you a little bit more control over your entire stereo spectrum. Let me play this back. So yeah, it just kind of gives you a little bit more control over your LCR, your left, center, right. This would be kind of neat to kind of really put whatever you're processing, whether it be vocal or guitar, kind of really kind of put it where you want it in the stereo spectrum without having to completely rely on panning and so forth. It's got a left boost, center boost, right boost. Yeah, so that's kind of neat. I'm already I'm already further into this video than I'd initially anticipated, so I'm going to kind of go a little bit faster over some of these next pedals. So bubble vibrato based on the Boss VB2. So this is a vibrato, so it's going to be, like I mentioned earlier, more about volume fluctuation. Let me play this. So yeah, you can tell it's fluctuating the volume. Kind of the question I'm thinking in my head is like, really, what's the difference between a tremolo and a vibrato? This seems like whenever I kick up the stereo spread with this vibrato, it's not doing the left-right thing as much as the tremolo was. It seemed like the tremolo was really kind of bouncing back and forth, whereas the vibrato, it's putting in some stereo signal, but it's not like bouncing back and forth like the tremolo is. Yeah. Vibe rotary based on the Fender Vibratone. So let me give this a listen. So this is kind of interesting. So it's pretty much as we're seeing with these next few modulation pedals or whatever. These are kind of based on a Leslie speaker, which is like what a Hammond organ would be played through. So you have basically your top, your horn that the highs are played through, and then your woofer that the lows are played through, and then like the whole speaker is like spinning, and so that's what gives it that tonality of spinning, because it's literally a speaker spinning inside of a box. So this is it's pretty cool to have these emulations on here, because I'm a big fan of Hammond organs and Leslie speakers. So, if you had an organ VST or something that you were trying to play through, it would be kind of cool to run it into these pedals right here to kind of really give you the tonality of a Leslie speaker. And the Leslie speakers are basically have a switch on them, or on the organ, to control if it's moving slow or if it's moving fast. So if you have a slow part right here, then you kick it into fast to kind of change the how fast the speaker is spinning. And it's subtle, but if you have an actual Leslie speaker and then you hit it, if you hit the fast knob, it's going to start spinning the speaker faster, but it's just not going to instantaneously speed it up to the level. So there's like a little bit of a ramp up time, and you can control that right here. For how fast it takes to reach the speed for the fast speed versus the slow speed. So that's cool, and that's really kind of a characteristic of a Leslie speaker, is that that time between when it's reaching its slow speed and reaching the high speed, and vice versa. So that's actually pretty cool. So kind of listen for it right here. Let me turn this up a little bit. And you can see the speaker blend is splitting between the horn and the woofer. So if you have the woofer, it's going to be more low signal. If you have the horn, it's going to be more high signal. So here we go. Yeah, that's really cool. Moved to the 122 rotary based on the Leslie 122, as I was mentioning earlier. It's pretty much the same controls here. It's just going to be different tonality. You notice it's heavily distorted because the drive's really high. So yeah, it's going to be the same concept and pretty much the same controls. It's just going to they're just going to have different tonality tones to them. So here's the 145 rotary based on the Leslie 145. So you can notice right away that there's more low-end information for the 145 compared to the 122. So something to keep in mind as you're making decisions. Let's move on to the double take. This is going to be a Line 6 original. Let's listen to it. So yeah, it's basically a doubler, pretty much a chorus type effect. You know, you have a set 1 double, 2 doubles. This is basically going to control how many voices you have. And then source right here, if you had a stereo signal running into it, which I just have a mono signal running into it, so this really doesn't help me out right here. But, you know, say you had a keyboard or something that had 2 different inputs on it, you could actually single out which signal you wanted to modulate, so that's kind of cool. And when I start getting into like patch building videos, after I get through with all the rundowns, then we can start talking about splitting up stereo signals within a patch and doing things like that. So that might be when something like this would kind of come in handy. So I'm going to go to the poly detune, which is just the reason this particular effect is not showing up in stereo is because it only runs in mono. So if you have your stereo tab open, you're not going to be able to see this this pedal. So it's the poly detune right here, and I believe this is one of the updates that they had with the Helix 3.0 update. So let's give this a listen. So yeah, it's basically kind of it's a chorus effect. But it's running in mono, so it's kind of splitting the signal up into 2 things, and then just detuning one of them to kind of give you a doubled effect. So, and then you can turn it down. This 50. I don't think that's semitones. It's probably like. Yeah, I kind of like that. It's just kind of a subtle effect with a +9 or a +8 or something like that. So yeah, just kind of a subtle type of chorusy effect. Switching back over to the AM ring mod, we're gonna go back over to stereo. So this is gonna add like a ring frequency, so it's gonna be like an added frequency inside. So let's give us a listen. So that's kind of interesting. I mean, it's basically just a ring modulator, which if you're into synth patches and things like that, there's a lot of ring modulators inside of different synthesizers, so it's kind of with that type of idea. So this would be really good for like soundscapes and just like things like that, like radio, lo-fi type effects and stuff like that. Experimental. With a lot of these modulation effects, it's really just kind of getting in there and messing with the knobs and you know, just seeing what kind of weird sounds you can come up with. And then the pitch ring mod. Let's listen to this. So yeah, not really a whole lot of rhyme or reason to it. I mean, it's really just kind of making experimental sound, just getting in there, really mangling some audio, and coming up with some cool type effects. This would be really cool to use in conjunction with maybe a pedal, or to kind of like mess around with the knobs as the sound is playing throughout the duration. So either like automation or you know, things like that. Just get in there and mess with the knobs. It's really all there is to it. Nothing to it but to do it. You know what I mean? Okay, so that's all the modulation models that are in the mono and stereo tab. I'm going to go through the legacy tab. Not going to spend a lot of time on this, but the legacy tab really does have some really nice stuff in it, and not just in modulation, but in all of these different folders here. So be sure to check out the legacy tab, because you know, some stuff kind of gets thrown to the wayside. Stuff that you thought might be in there is actually in there, but you can't find it because it's in the legacy tab. So pattern tremolo, line 6 original. Yeah, it's kind of basically the same step pattern tremolo that we looked at earlier. Kind of the same basic controls, but probably just an earlier iteration of it. The panner, so this is going to be an auto panner, so this is going to like really kind of shift the signal in and out. Yep. Bias tremolo is going to be based on the 1960 Vox AC15 tremolo, which is basically another iteration of the 60 bias trim that we saw earlier. So opto tremolo based on the 1964 Fender Deluxe reverb. Script phase. As I mentioned earlier, the actual hardware unit of the MXR phaser, which is based on the MXR Phase 90, just has one knob. So this one right here just has one knob. Pan phaser, based on the Ibanez flying pan. That's kind of interesting. That's kind of something might be cool to mess around with. One of the gems found in the Legacy tab. Barber pole bass, or this is a Line 6 original. So it sounds like a tremolo with maybe some added either a low pass filter or just something else kind of thrown in there. I don't know if it's a phaser, but very interesting sounds out of that. So that'd be a cool one to kind of add to the arsenal. Dual phaser based on the Mutron biphase. Okay, moving on. Uni-Vibe, based on the Shin-ei Uni-Vibe, which we already kind of discussed previously. So that's interesting. Be careful with the feedback. The feedback seems like it's clipping it out, so be cognizant of that. Phaser based on the MXR Phase 90, so it's yet another iteration of the MXR phaser. Looks like a few more options here as far as the stages. Like I was talking about earlier, basically another name for voices. So, pitch vibrato. Pretty much a chorus type effect. It's changing the pitch of the vibrato, basically doing what a chorus would do, and that's based on the Boss VB2. Let's go to Dimension. This is based on the Roland Dimension D. So that'd be kind of interesting to add just as some subtle stereo spread type of a thing. Ooh. Analog chorus based on the Boss CE1. And so yeah, we went over the Boss CE1, the 70s chorus earlier, so this is just kind of an older version of that. The tri-chorus based on the Diatronix tri-stereo chorus. Once again, the Trinity chorus is the later version of this. That one just kind of seems like it has less switches. Analog flanger based on the MXR flanger. Jet flanger, based on the AADA flanger. AC flanger, based on the MXR flanger. One thing to notice with these legacy stomp boxes is that some of them are in mono, some of them are in stereo. This one seems like it's in stereo, even when I turn the width up, or that this is in mono, even when I turn the width up. So something to consider when you're using the legacy tab. 80A flanger based on the AADA flanger. Get some funky noises with that. Frequency shifter is a Line 6 original. So it's basically a ring modulator that has the actual ring completely isolated, although I guess you can turn the mix down right here. But this is kind of a simplified version of some of the frequency ring modulator shift things that we saw earlier. Kind of cool. You can get some bell type sounds with that. Ring modulator, another Line 6 original. So that's pretty cool. This is kind of how you would turn a guitar into a synth. So, because it's kind of the same idea. A synth kind of takes a waveform, like a basic sound, and then distorts it and adds different harmonics and stuff to it. So it's kind of the same concept. So if you're looking to make synthesizer noises out of a guitar signal or a vocal signal or whatever you want to run into it, this is kind of the effects that you would run, and then maybe add some distortion or some other processing to it. Rotary drum. This is based on the Fender Vibratone. Okay, and then rotary drum horn based on the Leslie 145. So these are kind of the rotary Leslie speaker type emulations. These seem a little bit more simplified. So maybe if you're looking for something you can just kind of turn on and have it on. Without really having to dive into all the controls to make it sound good, then that could be a direction you might want to go. So, and with that, I think we are finally making our way through all of the modulation stomp boxes and effects inside Line 6 Helix Native. I hope you found this as informative as I found it interesting to describe and to encapsulate. Sorry for not knowing completely everything that goes into like every one of these pedals, but we're just kind of playing around and experimenting. If there's one particular thing that you have a question about, then it's good to look up what pedal the particular pedal is emulating, like what the original pedal is that's based on, and then maybe going and looking at the manual for that pedal to like really know in depth what's going on, what exactly is going on with all the controls. So there's a wealth of knowledge at your fingertips, but at the end of the day, it's all about experimenting, just twisting the knobs and seeing what you can come up with. So with that, I'm going to sign off for now. Be on the lookout for more videos in this oncoming series. I'm trying to do one a week, hopefully 2 a week. I'm really trying to push through this entire series. But next up I have the delays and the reverbs, and yeah, we're making our way through. Alright guys, my name is Atomic Moon. Appreciate everybody for sticking with me, and if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please let me know. Please subscribe, like the video, yada yada yada. Alright guys, y'all take care. I'll see y'all next time.